In the Wild West, some women arrived with dreams and vanished without leaving a trace. Travelers whispered
This is
about
just
one
what I
saloon
needed.
girl who
I
appeared in
thought you
town
might.
after
Here
town,
you are.
always
Thank you, my
smiling,
dear. Of
always
course.
dancing, but never staying long enough for anyone to know her real name. Was she escaping something, or searching for something she could never find? Behind the music and laughter of frontier saloons lived stories filled with loneliness, reinvention, and secrets hidden in plain sight. Tonight, we uncover the forgotten lives of the saloon girls, the women who shaped the frontier but were erased from its legend. Before we uncover what history tried to hide, subscribe to Unseen Evidence, because some truths were never meant to be found, and tell me where you're watching this from. I'm curious to know. Let's continue. The lanterns began glowing long before the sun completely disappeared, as if the town itself knew that darkness arrived early in places built on uncertainty. And as the evening air settled over wooden buildings and drifting dusts, the saloon doors swung open to welcome another night that would look lively from the outside but feel very different from within, because behind the laughter and music were stories rarely told. Stories of women whose lives moved quietly between survival and performance. Women history would later call saloon girls, even though each of them carried a name, a past, and a future they could never fully predict. And as travelers stepped into town after long journeys across endless plains, the saloon lights became a beacon, promising warmth, companionship, and escape. Yet for the women working inside, those lights were not only symbols of opportunity, but reminders that every night required strength most people never saw, because the frontier demanded adaptation from everyone, but especially from those who lived in spaces where expectations were high and security was fragile. And many of the girls arrived believing in stories told by newspapers and advertisements that described the West as a place where reinvention was possible, where someone could leave behind an old life and start fresh under a new sky. Yet reality moved differently,
Come now, a sip will
shaped
do
by
us
long
good.
working
Aye, I
hours,
could use it.
unpredictable
It's been a long
crowds,
day,
and the
that it
emotional
has.
labor of creating joy, even when exhaustion settled deep into their bones, and the piano often began playing before the first drink was poured, its melody filling the room with a rhythm that disguised loneliness. Because saloons were more than businesses, they were gathering places for miners returning from the earth, cowboys seeking rest after weeks on the trail, merchants hoping for luck, and travelers searching for conversation. And in the middle of all this movement stood the women who listened, laughed, danced, and carried conversations that blurred the line between performance and genuine connection. And while some outsiders viewed them through narrow stereotypes, historical accounts revealed that many were
I believe you have something for
intelligent,
me.
resourceful,
think that?
and emotionally
told.
perceptive individuals who learned to read a
I
room
believe you
within
have something
seconds,
for me.
sensing
makes
when
you think
tensions
that?
were
I was
rising
told.
or when someone simply needed to be heard. And these skills were rarely written down in official records, yet they defined daily survival in an environment where change arrived without warning, because frontier towns grew quickly and vanished just as fast, tied to gold discoveries, railroad routes, or shifting economic tides that could transform a lively street into silence within months. And the uncertainty forced many saloon girls to become travelers themselves, moving from town to town following rumors of prosperity while forming temporary families with the women they met along the way, sharing advice about which customers were kind, which promises were empty, and which nights carried a strange feeling
is
that
just what I
suggested something
needed. I
unexpected
thought you
might
might.
happen.
Here you are.
And despite the
Thank you, my
chaos,
dear. Of
friendships
course.
formed deeply, built on
This
shared
place feels
experiences
different
that
tonight.
outsiders
It's just
could
you
not
and me
easily
now.
understand, because they lived inside a world that required constant awareness, balancing kindness with caution, confidence with vulnerability, and hope with realism. And as nights stretched long under flickering lanterns, the emotional weight of the work became clear, because every smile carried effort, and every conversation required energy. And yet moments of genuine joy existed too. Moments when laughter felt real, and music transformed the room into something almost magical, creating temporary communities where strangers forgot their worries for a few hours. And these moments made the work meaningful, even when challenges persisted. Because for some women, the saloon offered independence unavailable elsewhere, a chance to earn their own income and make decisions about their lives in ways that traditional roles might not allow, while for others it represented a complicated compromise, shaped by limited choices, and the truth of their lives rarely fit into simple categories of empowerment or hardship, existing instead in the space between, where resilience defined daily reality, and as the frontier evolved, so did public perception, with some communities welcoming saloon culture as essential entertainment, while others judged it harshly, creating social tensions that the women navigated carefully, learning when to speak openly and when silence offered protection. And beyond the saloon walls stretched vast landscapes that symbolized both freedom and isolation, reminding everyone that the West was still largely unknown territory. And in quiet moments between songs, many women reflected on their journeys, wondering whether they would remain in the same town or follow the next rumor of opportunity, because permanence felt like a distant concept in a world built on movement. And sometimes travelers returned years later, only to find the saloon gone, replaced by a different business or abandoned entirely, leaving behind only stories whispered by locals, who remembered the music and the dancers who once filled the room with energy. And these disappearing spaces contributed to the mysterious aura surrounding saloon girls, because when towns faded, so did records, allowing myths to replace reality, and storytellers later exaggerated certain aspects while ignoring others, turning complex individuals into symbols rather than people. Yet beneath the myths were human experiences, shaped by ambition, fear, creativity, and adaptability. And some women saved enough money to open their own establishments, redefining their roles within the community, while others chose quieter paths, stepping away from public life once they found stability elsewhere. And historians often struggle to reconstruct their stories fully, because official documents focus on business owners and political figures rather than performers, whose contributions were considered temporary despite their lasting cultural impact. And this absence creates an eerie feeling when examining the past, as if entire conversations vanished into the air like piano notes fading at the end of a song. And perhaps that is why their stories resonate today, because they reflect universal themes of identity, survival, and transformation, reminding us that history is not only shaped by those who held power, but also by those who navigated uncertain environments with courage and creativity. And when imagining the interior of a saloon during its busiest hour, one might picture warm lantern light reflecting off wooden floors, voices blending into a constant hum, and a sense that every person present carried a story intersecting briefly with others before continuing on separate paths. And within that atmosphere, the saloon girls moved with practiced grace, balancing trays, conversations, and performances in ways that required both physical coordination and emotional intelligence. And as the years passed and the American West transitioned into a more regulated and modernized society, many of these spaces disappeared or transformed, leaving behind photographs and scattered letters that offer glimpses into lives lived intensely but rarely preserved in detail. And the fading of the frontier marked the end of an era where reinvention felt possible with every sunrise. Yet the legacy of the saloon girls continued through stories passed down quietly, shaping popular imagination even when the realities remained misunderstood. And perhaps the most haunting aspect of their history is not any single event, but the realization that countless individuals contributed to the atmosphere of a time and place without ever receiving recognition equal to their influence, because they were witnesses to change, observers of humanity in its rawest form, and participants in the creation of communities that thrived briefly before dissolving into memory. And as the final lantern of the night dimmed and footsteps faded into the darkness, the echoes of music lingered, carrying with them the emotions of everyone who had gathered under that roof, leaving behind an invisible record of laughter, resilience, and quiet determination that continues to whisper through history long after the saloons themselves have disappeared.